Hello and good morning, everybody. Welcome to Big Talk. We are college sports with Midwest perspective. Apologies, I've got another thing going on in my ear again. That Instagram is really gets you off your game if you're not ready for it. So I am Sam Sprunger, and I am not Dalton Shetler. He is out on assignment yet again. But that means I've got Tony Hollinsworth joining me for the great 100th episode of Big Talk. Tony, how in the world are you?
I'm good. Glad to be here. You notice I'm trying to do my best Dalton impersonation. I got all my Michigan State stuff on right now. I'm trying to do my best Dalton impersonation that I can.
Yeah, well, I want to know what he has over on the boss to be able to go do. I know he was coming back from North Carolina, but that's much warmer than what we're in right now. So, or comparatively, I guess. I guess.
You notice he's kind of coming back at like good times though, because the kind of end of this week, or at least coming into next week, for at least here in central Indiana, it's supposed to be like in the 60s even at some point. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is December in the Midwest. Why are we in the 60s?
Well, it happens. We're used to getting fooled. I know it's. I was just talking to somebody, and I know we've got a lot to cover. We really do. But you know what? We'll go for. We've got an hour. Come on, ease up. But I can remember, like, I don't know if it's like my mind just went there saying, "Oh, we used to always have white Christmases." I can remember maybe 6 times maybe that I've had a white Christmas in my life. So I don't know. Maybe it's one of those that I just smash every one of those white Christmases together and say it was all the time. I don't know. But,
yeah, I say it's been a long time since I remember. I mean, I've been away from home for about the last 8 years, but I think 2012, 2013-ish, when the Midwest and East Coast got hit by that really big snowstorm. I know we had a white Christmas then for sure. It's not as prevalent as it used to be. And honestly, to me, it kind of sucks because I'm one of the few people in the world, and especially in the Midwest, that will say, I like snow. I like having a
So
white
you
Christmas.
are contesting that there were more.
I don't think there was. I don't think there was more, but it was always like, you'd have like a little bit of tiny snow on Christmas just to say you have it, and then it would be gone. It would be gone before like night's end, basically.
Yeah, well, it happens.
It does.
So,
it happens.
So we moved to we're going to talk a lot about the men's basketball season, and yes, if you're new to the show, first off, shame on you. We've already covered that if you're new to the show, shame on you. You should have been around, especially since we're on our 100th episode. You've had 99 weeks opportunity to find us. So if you're new to it, okay, you know what, we're happy you're here, but still, shame on you. Find us quicker. But maybe that's our fault, Tony. Oh, geez.
Maybe we should have spread the word more. You never know, man.
I tried, but anyways, no, I've lost my train of thought. But we're going to talk about some basketball today. And if you're new to the show, like I said, that's where I was going with. I'm a Purdue fan by nature. That's where I grew up with my nature. Tony, you are a Michigan State fan, kind of via some different routes, but you've got a couple of different teams that you root for. But of your Big Ten allegiance, it would be in Michigan State. Now, we talk about those guys normally somewhat because we have a rooting interest in it. But we've tried to get away from talking about just them. But this week, I think we need to talk about those two teams because both of them had huge statement wins this last weekend. Michigan State took on number 6 Baylor in Detroit and absolutely throttled the Bears. Not even like, oh, it was close for a little. No, it was 28-6 at one point.
It was 45-17 at half.
Correct.
At halftime.
Yeah. And that's the Dalton and I even talked about that. We talked about if we thought Michigan State could recover, and I said to him that if they could compete, I said not even win. I said if they have a good battle against them and they compete very well, I'm not as concerned about what's happening to Michigan State. I never expected the throttling 24 points
Yeah.
of Baylor by Michigan State. I did not see that. Tyson Walker, 25 points for the Spartans, led the way. What does this say now? Does that make, is this the anomaly for this season, or is the fact that they started and were below 500 and this victory got them to 500 say more?
I think this getting them to 500 kind of says more, because I'll be honest, I haven't been able to watch a lot of the college basketball so far this season just because traveling for work. But from what I have seen with Michigan State, it's kind of the same thing that we've seen the last couple of years is, Tom Izzo is one of those coaches. He has his team go through the absolute gauntlet at the beginning of the year. So that way, when it comes to in-conference play with the Big Ten, they're
Right.
probably one of the most battle-tested teams next to Purdue that you could potentially get, because Purdue is facing a lot of these top teams now,
We'll talk
and they're
about them
winning.
here in a minute.
But to me, it just goes to show that the potential that Michigan State has is there. The biggest thing that I've noticed that Michigan State still has to clean up is they're still undisciplined. They still get penalized a lot. They still make a lot of very small mistakes that end up accounting overall. And that's what people need to realize. And I know Coach Izzo realizes this. And it's, to me, this is just what's weird. Probably the last 3 or 4 years that I've watched Michigan State basketball, that it hasn't been corrected. You can make a small mistake, but when you have, 5 to 10 guys on your roster, they're all making those small mistakes. Those small mistakes add up. And then before you know it, you're close to the end of the game, if not the end of the game. And then you've potentially cost yourself because of those small mistakes. So that to me is what has really, been the biggest takeaway from Michigan State is the potential is there. They've got all the potential in the world to be that top team. They're just making those little mistakes that are hurting them in the long run. But I'm hoping with this victory over over the number 6 team at the time, team in the country, in a dominant fashion, has kind of showed them, okay, look, if you put your head down, if you focus and you grind, you're unbeatable almost. Like hardly anybody can take that down if you really put your head down and you focus.
If you look at the newest poll after Michigan State absolutely throttles Baylor. Baylor went from number 6, and they got beat by an under 500 team who was not ranked in any way, wasn't getting any votes in any way. Got beat by 24 and dropped to number 10. What does that say about Michigan State and what the voters know about, the writers know about Michigan State? What it means is they still think Michigan State's a really good team this season. It's not, even though they were at under 500, now with that win at 500, and since then they've not won another game, so they're above 500 now. But what that says is they still see them as one of the better teams in the country because they just throttled a team by 24 points on a neutral court. Now, granted, it was in Detroit, but in a neutral court, absolutely demolished the number 6 team in the country, and that team only dropped to number 10. That tells me they still feel that Michigan State is one of the better teams in the country. Not playing like the better team, one of the better teams in the country, but they are one of the better teams.
Well, and it says a lot too, because if you remember at the beginning of the season, Michigan State was ranked number 4 in the entire country prior to, them unfortunately going on a losing skid. And it says a lot too that I like the committee for, men's basketball better than I do the committee for college football.
Let's not get into that one.
I know we won't go too deep into that one. But because if you look at all of the standings, there's only one, top 25 team right now that's technically unbeaten. And that's Houston right now at number 3. But all these other top teams have a loss, and it hasn't completely and totally decimated their season. And if they do have a loss, it hasn't completely dropped them out of where their standings are, because and I know we've talked about this, that's kind of the beauty that I love about, basketball as a whole. It doesn't really matter how good your team is or isn't. It's any given day that you play on the court, you have a potential chance to win. And it could be something as simple as, it's just a last minute shot that the other team gets that potentially cost you the win, or you just make a mistake. And I think that's a good thing about college basketball is you have room for errors and room for improvement, and it doesn't completely and totally decimate your season from still being good. And like you said with Baylor, yes, you were number 6, you lost to Michigan State, but you only dropped to 10. You're still one of the best 10 teams in the country as it stands right now.
Michigan State sits at 7-5 right now. They are in technically 14th place in the conference because they are 0-2, but they're tied. Actually, I'm sorry. They're tied for 13th because Iowa is also 0-2.
Yep.
But you talked about, the only undefeated team in the top 3 is the number 3 team, Purdue, who jumped up to number 1 because they defeated an undefeated number 1 Arizona team. Now, granted, they played in Indianapolis, so it was basically a home game for Purdue, but it was a neutral court site. Technically, it's all on neither campus. Purdue walks away with a 92-84 victory. They put up 92 points on the number 1 team in the country. Granted, they needed most of those 92 points to win, but they did. Fletcher Lawyer leads the way with 27 points for Purdue. Purdue makes the statement that they have by far the best resume in the country right now, having beaten Gonzaga, having beaten Marquette, having beaten Tennessee, and now the Xavier's no slouch. They've beaten Xavier. Now they add Arizona to this. They by far at this point, I would have to think that and looking at blind, take names off of it and just say these are the rankings of the teams they've played. Purdue's got the best resume.
Oh yeah, for sure. And again, that kind of speaks testament to Purdue. And this is what I've kind of liked with Purdue over a lot of the Gonzaga teams, because that's been kind of the knock against Gonzaga for a long time is, yes, Gonzaga plays a lot of these games and they win pretty wholeheartedly, but then they lose to a lot of the top teams. Like Gonzaga, for example, lost to Purdue. They lost to UConn just 2 games ago. So for Purdue, I like it because they've almost kind of taken the Coach Izzo route of, we need to play these tough teams
They've
early.
Sure started to, at least in the past couple of years, haven't they?
And you notice it pays out dividends in the end, because not only do you get a true test.
Somebody's gonna say no, Purdue still loses early.
Right. Wait till you get to the Sweet 16. You're going down to some unranked Cinderella team.
Oh well.
Again,
it'll be different this year. Anyways, keep it going. I'm sorry.
Every Cowboys fan says that it'll be different this year.
I didn't mean to sidetrack that.
But no, I mean I think it's a great thing for Purdue because they do get an early test on, and I think it's good because, like I said, it gives you breathing room. If you do potentially lose, you lose to one of the top teams in the country. It's not going to completely and totally hurt your resume if you do. And again, it gives you room for improvement. Okay, we faced a top team and we potentially lost. What do we need to fix now while it's still early in the season, so that way we can set ourselves up for better success in the future? So I think it's great for Purdue. I like the aggressiveness that Purdue has taken. And like I said, it's paid off dividends. And it does kind of help them in the fact of, now they're battle tested just like Michigan State. So when they come into the Big Ten conference, as far as the actual conference play consistently, okay, now we can basically steamroll over everybody except for Northwestern for whatever reason. But luckily that Northwestern game is already done and over with.
Right.
Now I do kind of wonder, and I wonder if this maybe plays into the factor of what has been their recent playoff woes, is they have all this very early success and they're so good at it. But then when they get into the playoffs, do you think they're either just gassed because they've given so much over the weeks, or do you think that it's almost a bit of kind of over cockiness of, we know we're better than them, we know we should beat them, but they end up tripping, they end up fumbling over their own selves?
When is the last time the Big Ten Conference won a national championship, Tony?
That would be 2000 with Michigan State.
The year 2000. You remember Conan O'Brien? The year 2000. You remember that?
Mm-hmm. I sure do.
Okay, so
no, I was 5. I still remember.
But you still remember it.
Yes.
But anyways, so 2000 was the last time the Big Ten Conferences won a national championship, and it was Michigan State with the Flintstones and in Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what the problem is, and I think Dalton and I have covered this a couple of different times, is play inside the Big Ten Conference does not translate well into playoff basketball in the one and done. Now, if you were playing a series of 7 games, it's kind of like what Tobin Anderson said last year at the press conference after they beat the 1 seed Purdue. They said, we play this another 9 times. Purdue beats us 9 times.
Yeah.
Like we had the perfect game plan. We played the perfect game, and they didn't. It all lined up. We beat them. Yeah. Okay, so in one game scenarios, the Big Ten style doesn't translate well to teams that have a perfect game plan and operate well.
Yeah.
Or the Big Ten team has an issue, an off shooting night other than what their bread and butter is. And the one team they're playing is matching up against their bread and butter really well. And not letting that bread and butter score 38 points. Because had Zach Edey scored 38 against FDU, we're not talking about the second 16 seed to win a ball game. You know, but he scored 22, and none of his other teammates could do much. So FDU is the perfect game plan, operated perfectly with some struggles from the team. So I don't think it was them being cocky. I don't think it was them being tired. I think it was them running into a team that was operating very well, and it stinks for me as a Purdue fan because it always seems to be a double-digit seed.
Yes.
Except for Virginia in what was it, 2018, I believe it was. So, like, other than that, it always seems like it's a double-digit seed, but I think Dalton hit it pretty well. Is they don't, for what they're playing for and against in the Big Ten, teams have it figured out to do well in the conference. It just doesn't translate well because yeah, thanks, Scott. He's talking about my shirt. But the whole point of the Big Ten doesn't matter if it's Purdue, doesn't matter if it's IU, it doesn't matter if it's Michigan State. It just doesn't seem to translate as well into the tournament as it does inside the conference. So I think that's why it translates a little differently and why it happens in the postseason. But I so wholeheartedly expect it to be different. I'm not saying Purdue's going to win the national championship, but I think they make a longer run than a first round exit for one. But I think they maybe even get to a regional final or a Final Four this season finally.
I could see that because I think that plays into a big fact too, because a lot of these guys have been on the last 2 years, unfortunately, of Purdue's woes. So that kind of sticks with them of, wait a minute, we're better than this. We've played better than this. We've beaten better teams than this. So that has to be some type of fuel for a lot of these guys. And that's probably why a lot of these guys said, you know what, we're not going to declare for the NBA yet. We're going to stay here because we want one more run to potentially try to win a national title or at least compete for it. And, kind of help clean up our reputation for what we've got in the last couple
years.
Well,
that in the tournament, as long as IU loses, I'm good too, Scott. But in the one and done scenario, it's not a fair assessment of how your season is if you get an early exit. It just doesn't work right. And we've talked about this a lot too, is you can't base your whole entire season based on your tournament run, just because what happens if you run it. Virginia was the number 1 overall seed the year they got beat by Maryland, Baltimore County. They got housed by Baltimore County or Maryland, Baltimore County. They had an off night, and Baltimore County had a fantastic shooting night and beat them by 20 points.
Yep.
FDU had the same thing happen against Purdue. That's why it doesn't happen that often. Is you just don't necessarily get those 1 seeds that have a really bad day. You get them occasionally historically, but you have a 1 seed normally winning by a few points. But but we've stayed long enough on whether or not Purdue's going to go very far. I think they're going to do better, but we still have plenty of season left. But let's talk about a couple of other teams in the Big Ten. The current number 1 team in the Big Ten, Tony, according to conference record, is
your favorite
in Bloomington. One. IU is number 1 in the conference at 2-0. Blah 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 blah. But that isn't the game that I'm necessarily. The Kansas game they lost against Kansas. It was a good game in Bloomington there at Assembly Hall, and but the one that I want to talk about is The last game they played, which was this last Tuesday, they played Morehead State. IU coming out victoriously 69-68.
Yep.
Whew. They struggled with Morehead State after playing with the second team in the country toe to toe. It almost reminiscent with minus the wins or the win against the number 2 team and the loss against the other team, reminiscent of what Northwestern did, beating Purdue and then losing to Chicago State. Is this something that is an anomaly to where Morehead State's probably better than what we're expecting? When they scheduled this, Morehead State wasn't that good, or whatever, whatever the case is, but now they struggle with Morehead State. Is this a product of they're not as good as who played against number 2, or they're not as bad as this?
I think it kind of goes back to what you were talking about with Purdue of, sometimes it just, you come in, you have a bad night and another team has a really good night. It's just different parts of the season of when it happens, to be 100% honest with you. And yeah, they can't psych themselves up for a lesser team. And that is kind of true. It's kind of hard when you come in, you're a Power 5 school, you've had a really good season, you historically have had a lot of success. You get this, kind of not undernamed, but lower school that is, if it was college football, you're basically you're paying them to let them, let you beat the crap out of them type deal.
Right. They get a payday.
Yeah, they get a payday.
It's not as big in basketball.
Yeah. But, kind of like what I alluded to earlier with basketball, with why I love college basketball more than anything is it's any given game. This, like I said, it might have just been, this was Morehead State's like, you know what, we're clicking on all the right cylinders. We're going to keep it close. We're going to be competitive. We're not just going to let them steamroll over us. Yeah. And it probably caught IU off guard. And like you said, IU probably just had a rough night. They're like, wait a minute, they're not supposed to be doing this to us. Like, timeout. We're not ready for this.
Well, and it's easier to be able to compete when you've got maybe one really hot shooter or player, or maybe even 2 that have a really good back and forth that keep a team in it. And it's easier to get 12 guys aligned into the right mindset than it is 85 guys that go out on the field for football. So it's a little more difficult for those lesser teams to, like a Ball State, to go to Florida and beat them in the swamp. That ain't happening. But Ball State could go to Florida in basketball and just have the right day. Boom, they win by 6 points.
And I don't know if this is the case, but I do believe a lot of it is in the preparation too. IU going to prepare against Kansas significantly differently than how they're going to compare and how they're going to compete against Morehead State. However, on the other flip end, Morehead State's going to compete the same exact way they compete against anybody else in their division or conference as they are with how they're going to compete up against IU. So I think that plays a lot into the factor of it is what do you prepare? How much do you prepare against, someone like Kansas as compared to a Morehead State type of thing?
Yeah, it's been an interesting season to this point with the Chicago State. Northwestern goes in the same venue, beats the number 1 team in the country in overtime. But I still will contest that was a they say, oh well, Purdue loses to Northwestern, then Northwestern loses to Chicago State. Okay, I didn't get to watch the Purdue Northwestern game, but I heard that it was Northwestern played extremely well out of their minds. Purdue didn't play that well. It still went to overtime, and it needed a miracle for Northwestern to win. So I think that it was a combination of the both anomalies. Chicago State did the same thing to Northwestern then when they came into Welsh Ryan Arena to play. That's what happened. It's the same context, I think. It's just it was Northwestern was on both ends of that.
Yeah. And plus, you have to think too with Northwestern, it was kind of the same thing like you said with Purdue. It took them to overtime. Chicago State only beat Northwestern by 2. It was literally just a last shot type of deal for them to bring home the victory. So I mean, it wasn't like Northwestern lost by like a blowout. And again, that's what I like about college basketball. It all it takes is that one shot can make a difference between you winning or you losing.
Well, and by all means, the comment was just made. Northwestern shouldn't have been. They shouldn't have been in the game against Purdue. Doesn't matter that it was in Evanston or not. Purdue had an off night in their shooting, which has been their demise. Was their demise last year in Evanston. So like it's but I think a lot of times Purdue historically up until here recently they really struggled going to Penn State. So environments do that to you too. So I think that was probably what Welshrein did to the Boilermakers. But let's look at another game on Tuesday, a really good one, 106-101. Florida downs Michigan. Wow, 101 or 106-101, double overtime. Doug McDaniel for the Wolverines had 33 points, but Michigan fallen on some hard times. Tony, they're 6-6 right now. They've lost just the one in a row. They're 1-1. Like they're 1-1 in the conference. They're 6-6 overall heading into the holiday break. They might have one coming up. Have it coming up here. I don't have the schedule right.
They have it December 29th against
so they're off through
the
McNeese State, or what used to be McNeese State, I guess. But yeah, so they're at 6-6. I've seen some reports, but I haven't seen it really talked about, so I don't know how confirmed it was. But I think the people in Ann Arbor are getting a little even shorter on the leash with Coach Howard there.
Yeah. So funny enough, I actually have a guy at work who is a massive Michigan fan, and usually he talks more about football because obviously Michigan has had more success in football here the last few years. So I asked him, I said, all right, man, what do you think of Coach Howard? Do you think he's gone at the end of the season? He told me, he goes, honestly, dude, I think he's gone before then. He goes, I think he said, I think I honestly see him getting fired in the middle of the season.
Wow.
And he kind of had a lot of the same thoughts that you and I did when, Hunter Dickinson announced that he was going to be transferring out to Kansas. And, one of his boys left Michigan to go into the draft. Another one of his sons, I can't remember which one, it seems as if he's not taking it as seriously with the athletic trainers and whatnot. And apparently the athletic trainers kind of scolded him for it. And then Coach Howard comes out and, kind of rips him a new one, the athletic trainer a new one, not even his own son. So I think his days are numbered in Ann Arbor. The expectations haven't been there. Michigan has had a lot of the talent that they could potentially need to make a deep run here the last couple of years. They just haven't. You had that mass exodus of talent here the last year. And like you said, they're 6-6. They're, technically 1-1 in the conference right now.
They're not technically, they are 1-1.
1-1. But, like we've talked about every year, what are we going to get with this Michigan Wolverines team? Are we going to get a Michigan team that is semi-competitive, or are we going to get a Michigan team that everybody can basically roll over and, march into the Big Ten tournament with? So I see his days as super, super numbered personally.
Do you agree, though, that he's going to be gone before the end of the season, or the Wolverines just going to hold on to him until the end of the season and just start fresh next year?
I think they hold on to him for at least the rest of the season because, but I could also make the argument we maybe see about halfway through the Big Ten season, like that home game versus Rutgers on February 3rd, and then you basically have the back half of the schedule then. I could maybe see that being the determining game, or, because of history's past, the next game right after that is
Maryland,
against number 24, Wisconsin.
Oh, Wisconsin. It's so funny. We've got multiple teams to call out.
Well, I say Wisconsin just because he's, fist fighting Wisconsin's head.
Well, he fought with Mark Turgeon from Maryland too. So that's why I figured that, but there's probably no coaching staff nor players around from that altercation he had with Coach Turgeon in the Big Ten tournament that year.
And if that's the case, their only game against Maryland is at Maryland on January 11th. So if it happens, it's going to happen at the beginning of the new year, basically.
I tell you what I foresee happening is if it gets to, let's say, that point against Rutgers and they drop that game against Rutgers, they will not fire him, but they will tell him you need to resign, and they'll make it available for his health issues that he's had.
Yeah, because he just came back from heart surgery.
To let him step away for his, and then it saves face for him. It saves face for Michigan. Look, we care about Coach Howard, which I don't doubt that they care about Juwan Howard. I don't doubt that. When he was a part of the Fab Five, he did a lot of good things for that university. So I'm sure the university overall loves him.
Yeah.
And for the limited success that they've had as when he has been the coach, for sure they love him. But I don't think they're in love anymore with the style of coaching that he's brought to Ann Arbor. And I think that's probably what the biggest thing is they're going to want to get rid of and get somebody new in there. But will you find anybody midstream, and will you save a season? Now, I guess it could. They're still 500, but honestly, would the change from Coach Howard or from Juwan Howard to somebody in the whoever it ends up? I know last year when he was suspended, or the year before when he was suspended, who was it with it? Martelli, Phil Martelli came in and coached for him. The former coach of St. Joe's, I believe, is his I think it's St. Joe's, but he's his assistant, and he took over. Do you go with him if you decide midstream that Howard needs to be gone? Or do you just write it out with him,
I would say you really wouldn't be wrong with either one, because at least Martelli, he has the experience of doing it before. So, he could come in and he could do it correctly. You wouldn't have some guy,
unless Martelli's left. I don't think he has, but yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea, to be honest with you. We could probably look and see. Probably. But no, I mean, I don't feel like they would be wrong for doing either one. And that's why I kind of said more the Rutgers game when you're halfway through the Big Ten conference schedule, kind of seeing where you're at before you say, okay, you know what, we're gonna kind of make him take the, take the resignation, in kind of on quote unquote good graces with the university. And yes, Phil Martelli is still currently the associate head coach for the Michigan Wolverines.
It would be one of those. It would be, okay, we didn't fire him. He didn't quit because he was mad. He quit because of health reasons. They could play it off, and even though it is the thinnest veiled thing ever in the world, it doesn't matter. That's what the official, 20 years from now, you go, how did the Howard? Oh, he resigned because he had health issues.
Yeah. But no, I mean, to me, honestly, it's one of those, you don't really lose if you do have him resign, and you don't really win if you ride out with him throughout the end of the season, because is it going to potentially change not only our thoughts on Michigan, but the overall committee's thoughts on Michigan if they are able to get a couple wins? Probably not.
Because I was gonna say, does he still get fired if he turns it around and makes the tournament?
I still think he does, because I kind of agree. I think they've fallen out of love with his coaching. I mean, he's been the head coach for what, 4 or 5 years now. Like, it's like you've had more than enough time to get the guys in that you want to kind of build your culture, build your system, and you're not getting us the results we kind of expect. And I don't think their expectations are anything crazy like, oh, go win us a national title. It's be competitive. Let us at least, be kind of a force in the Big Ten that people have to recognize and deal with, not basically a 500 team that you're giving us and everybody can basically, pull a win out against pretty easily.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see with Michigan, because I think you're right. If you let him stick it around, but you say behind the scenes or whatever, of course, they can just say, hey, you're going to get fired if you don't resign because of your health issues. But I guess if they let him write it out and they made the tournament, they could still say, we're letting you go, or you're going to resign because of that, or we're letting you go just because you're not a good fit right now anymore. Minus a run to the national championship, which I highly do not see that happening. But stranger things have happened, of course. But short of that, I would say that they could probably still get away with him being let go, even though that maybe they let him run the gambit. But you do run that issue of maybe he gets the public on his side if he does make that run. So maybe they do get rid of him because of that.
Yeah, I say, like I said, anything's really possible with it. And like I said, I don't feel like they're going to be wrong if they do. I don't feel like they're wrong if they do decide to keep him and ride it out. Honestly, for Michigan, they're not really stuck between a rock and a hard place, because again, what are the expectations for this Michigan Wolverines team? What are their aspirations? What do they want to do? Is it, just be competitive in the Big Ten? Is it win the Big Ten? Because that's probably a pretty far unrealistic goal, but
right.
it is technically in the running to be able to do. It's just highly unlikely type of thing.
So, Dalton and I had talked about this Big Ten season. We thought that with the beginning of the season, Purdue, Michigan State would be the far and above and beyond number one, number two teams. I still have a firm belief that Michigan State's going to be in that top.
Yeah,
they're going to the top. A top team, let's say. I don't know that they're going to be number two necessarily. They have 2 losses under their belt. They could come back and make it to point to where they're the second best. They could go undefeated the rest of the way, or lose maybe 1 or 2 only and have 4 losses, being the second best. Not my point. I still think they're a top 5 team in the conference. But of the teams that are in the better records, and I'm going to go by winning percentage. Overall, you've got Purdue at 11-1. Do you agree they're still the baseline for Purdue, or for the Big Ten? Purdue's the benchmark right now.
Yep.
So then, of those other teams, let's look at 10-2 Ohio State. They've won 2 in a row. They're 1-1 in the conference, 7-1 at home. They're 0-1 on the road, but that just means that they haven't played any true road games really right now. But are they gonna be able to compete for that top rung? Purdue.
I would put them in the top 5. I don't know about directly underneath Purdue, but I would probably put them in the top 5. I'd probably put them right at 5, to be honest with you.
Do you agree that Michigan State's one of those top 5 teams?
Yes.
Even though they're at the bottom, like literally right now, looking at the standings on ESPN.com, they are last. So you still think they're top 5?
Yes.
I agree. I don't disagree. Nebraska 10-2, won 3 in a row. They're 8-1 at home, 1-1 on the road. They are 0-1 against the AP top 25, 0-1 against the coaches, or the USA Today top 25. Are they going to maintain? They don't have any really big wins.
I say I would put them just outside of the top 5. I'd put them right at about 6, because I do think it's a good Nebraska team. They did beat Michigan State, which is kind of a big significant win for them.
It was in in Lincoln, but yes, they did beat them. Yes.
So I mean,
it's a nice feather to have in your cap.
It is. So I mean, that says a lot about them, but kind of the same thing. They haven't really had any true test games that they've won. I mean, they've had test games, but they haven't won any of those matchups. So I would put them just outside of the top 5 in the Big Ten.
Northwestern 8-2 or 9-2, 6-1 at home, 1-0 on the road. They've won 2 in a row. They're 1-0 against both the AP and the USA Today. We know who that's against. It's against Purdue, but that tells you they don't play a lot of teams in the top 25. Yeah. Are they going to be able to stick around? Are they a top 5, or are they down there with Nebraska?
I think they're kind of down there with Nebraska. I say that because you look at their schedule real quick. They've played 3 power 6 schools in college basketball. They lost to Mississippi State, Power 5. They beat the number 1 team, Purdue, but again, we've kind of talked about that. It was more of an off night for Purdue than it was.
Oh, it was an off night and a good night. I mean, they played a really good game. I'm not taking anything away from Northwestern, but Purdue, you look at their stats, they played like garbage comparatively.
Yeah. And then they just won recently against Arizona State, and they beat them 65-46. Other than that, they really haven't beaten anybody that I'm like, whoa, that's a big win. They've played Dayton, they've played NIU, they've played URI, Western Michigan. These aren't really teams that I'm like, okay, yes, record-wise, you look good, but like you said, you haven't really faced anybody of true talent or competitiveness. So I would kind of put them down towards the bottom.
And let's say you lost to Chicago State at home.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Last one we're going to talk. Actually, we got 2 more I want to talk about. 8-2, number 13 in the country, Illinois. Illinois is 6-1 at home, 1-1 on the road. They've won 1 in a row. They've only won 1 in a row. Excuse me. They're 1-2 against both of the AP and USA Today polls. So that tells me they've played the same 3. But they're 1-2 against the top 25. Are the Illini figuring that out? Is Brad Underwood seeing this team gel, which last year at the time of the Big Ten tournament had said, nope, we haven't even gelled yet.
Yeah.
Which meant an early exit in the tournament.
Yeah. I'd put them at about 3 right now in the Big Ten. I think they are the third best team in the conference. I think they're doing well. And kind of like you said with him, at that time they hadn't really gelled, but we've seen here recently, and even honestly during the Big Ten tournament, we saw glimpses and moments where they did make it gel and they made it mesh. They took Michigan State down to the wire. They took IU down to the wire. So they have the ability to be competitive and really fight. So I would put them right at about 3, like right in the middle of the top
Okay,
5.
actually, we have 2 more because it's the one that Dalton and I both talked about, and I think you even kind of agreed too. Maryland, 7-4. They're 7-0 at home,
Mm-hmm.
0-2 on the road, 1-3 in a row. They're 0-1 against the top 25. They struggled early. They've
Yeah.
struggled. We thought that they were probably the third best team, maybe them and Ohio State and Illinois kind of competing for it. Do you agree that Maryland is not performing to? Do you think it's an anomaly, they're going to recover, or are they behind and they're going to fall down to that middle tier?
I think they kind of fall to the middle tier because, believe it or not, there's another team that I would actually put at the 4 spot in the top 5.
Don't say it yet.
Okay. But no, I mean, I do think they're good. I think the potential is there. Their the home record, that's fantastic, because I mean that's honestly half the battle, is just being able to defend your home court when it comes to any type of play, whether it's conference or non-conference. But I think they're really close. And if you remember, even what was it, last year and year before last, I said Maryland's my dark horse. Not going with that this year, but Maryland was my dark horse.
Here's a comment from one of our viewers here. So his former baseball coach. But what I was gonna, the other team I wanted to bring up, and you may have a different one, and I know maybe which one it is if this isn't the team you were talking about. Number 24, Wisconsin, 8-3. They're 5-1 at home, 1-2 on the road. They're 2-2 against the top 25. The Badgers, Connor Esigian, freshman, super freshman from last year. He's fighting for minutes on the court. Are the Badgers going to figure this out, and are they your dark horse, fourth best team in the conference?
Believe it or not, they are. And I say that because, like you said, they're 2-2. They beat number 24 Virginia. They lost by 10 to number 9 Tennessee, which isn't terrible. They at least, they kept it close. They beat number 3 Marquette pretty handedly, 75-64. They beat Michigan State at the Breslin Center.
Thumped
and then
Michigan State at the Breslin Center.
And then they traveled to number 1 Arizona and lost 98-73. So
which, I mean, a lot of teams lose to Arizona by a lot.
Exactly, and it was in Arizona on top.
It was a road game.
So I mean, this to me, this kind of shows Wisconsin. They're also trying to be battle tested, and they're coming out with some results out of it. So yeah, I would put them at number 4 as kind of my dark horse. I think they have a really, really good shot. And I know we've talked about this the last couple of years. Wisconsin has had a couple really good teams that we think, had they kind of got it to gel and mesh, could potentially make a deep run in the Big Ten, Big Ten conference. And as much as it pains me to say it, I think that might be the case this year. They're probably going to be one of those top 5 teams.
I inadvertently left one out. And believe it or not, I did not do it intentionally.
Oh,
it was IU. It was IU. IU's 9-3. They're 6-1 at home. They're 1 loss coming to this number 2 team in the country, so not a bad loss at home. Yeah. They're 1-0 on the road. They're 0-2 against the top 25 though. So does IU have enough? Now they're kind of set in the middle of the road in the preseason expectations, but is IU good enough to push their way past where you said, you think some of those number 2 or those 2 tiers like Nebraska and teams like that, is that where IU ends up, or are they going to shock the world and get into the top 5?
I think they're going to kind of also be in the middle, because if you look at their schedule, yeah, they were competitive against Kansas. We talked about them being, they kept it close against Morehead State. They kept it close at Michigan. They only, won 78-75. They got destroyed by Auburn.
Also Thursday, yesterday they handled North Alabama pretty hard.
Yeah,
they beat them by 17. So
yeah,
I forgot to put that in there though.
But I mean, they got absolutely destroyed by Auburn. 104-76 at home in Bloomington. And then of course they got thumped pretty hard by, number 5 UConn 77-57. So I don't have as much faith in IU this year as I did last year. I think they might make some noise. They'll probably get a couple pretty quality wins, especially with a lot of home games will favor them. But overall, I kind of see them as middle of the pack of the Big Ten right now.
It'll be interesting to see how we make it to the middle of the season once we hit all basketball season, once the football season, the college playoffs get done, and the national championship game. That's when basketball really takes the center stage, and that's when you need to start paying attention. And we're gonna effort getting Mike DeCourcy back on to kind of talk about that once we get to basketball being the only game in town, so to speak.
Right.
Once we get that going, we're going to effort getting Mike DeCourcy, who was fantastic last year, talking about breaking down all the Big Ten teams, and because he does the bracketology where he predicts where teams are going to end up, and we always kind of we really enjoy him. So that'll be the interesting part that we get to when basketball becomes king. But right now we're still talking about football as well. And let's talk a little bit about the college football playoffs before we sign off. We've only got about 12 more minutes that we can chat, but let's talk about the football playoffs and possible conference expansion again. We can kind of put those together because we only have one team in the rooting interest when it comes to the Big Ten Conference. Honestly, if Michigan wins, great. If they don't, I'm not going to be heartbroken either.
Yep.
I think whoever wins that Michigan-Alabama game will probably win the national title, though. What are your thoughts on that? Yep.
I kind of disagree. I honestly think I say that because, while I do think Alabama will probably beat Michigan, unfortunately, and I say that because of A, it's Alabama, B, it's Michigan and Michigan's woes with bowl games the last 6 years or so when it comes to them competing in a bowl game, and the fact that, did you kind of see how discouraged Michigan was when they found out they were going to have to play Alabama? They were not thrilled.
Oh yeah, well, I think they were caught off guard that they were playing Alabama because they didn't expect Alabama to be there.
Yes.
But I think they also went, oh,
crap, it's Alabama.
Because let's call it what it. Alabama's still a really good football team. They just, to me, didn't deserve to be there. This was the year, and I think, and this is the furthest I'm going to go. I'm not going to go any deeper than this statement by me. The committee was scared to death not to put an SEC team in the playoff, and so they said, okay, Alabama beat Georgia, so we have to put Alabama in. Well, shoot, Texas won their conference too, and they beat Alabama, so we've got to put them in. That's where Florida State ended up getting screwed. I still contest that Jordan Travis should have been the Heisman Trophy winner because his team was so good that his team still went undefeated and didn't make it into the playoffs after he got hurt, and his injury was stated as one of the reasons why Florida State didn't make it to the playoffs. Yes. Therefore, to me, that means he's the best player in the country then.
So I've got 3 real quick things I want to kind of add to that. Is one, I do agree. I think when they came into that meeting, they had already said there's no way we are leaving out our SEC champion outside of the college football playoffs. It is absolutely not going to happen given their past success over the last 15 plus years of college football. The second thing that I would throw in there, like you said, if they leave out Texas, then the college football playoff committee realizes, oh crap, the regular season, I guess, just doesn't matter. And then they're in even more of a hole that
thank goodness we're expanding to 12 next year. That's probably why they made the choice they did.
Yes. So there is a third thing that I want to kind of tie into it, and I'm going to play the tiniest bit of defense for the college football playoff committee. Like, if you're the pass rusher and I'm the left tackle and you're coming straight at me, I'm going to kind of like bump you with my shoulder. Not really enough to stop your momentum of sacking,
but at least push you outside enough to maybe get the pass off still.
Maybe. And I say
under pressure.
I say that because it's only a 4-team college football playoff format. So the fact that they didn't kind of have an idea that eventually in the future you have a Power Five, standing. You even had a Power Five when you made it 4 teams, that you could potentially have all 5 of your Power Five conferences be in this position, and you didn't have an emergency plan built in, is kind of mind blowing to me. But I do kind of agree.
We should know the NCAA works on a wing and a prayer 98% of the time.
Yes. But I will say, I don't know. I think I had sent it to you and Dalton, or at minimum, I sent it to you. I kind of like JJ Watt's idea of Michigan and Washington get a bye week. You have the other 4 teams of Georgia, FSU, Texas, and Alabama do a random draw. They face each other. You get 1 extra week of college football. You get more money, which is the biggest reason why you put Alabama in over Florida State. And then you have a better product overall. Nobody gets quote unquote screwed, like the, Bret Hart Montreal screw job for WWE fans. Nobody got screwed. And, everybody gets a fair shot at that point. But that I liked that idea. I'm just upset they didn't unfortunately think about doing something like that, or they didn't have that. They didn't have any type of wiggle room for the rules that they created, that they set up, which is, but oh well.
My question is what would it have hurt?
Nobody.
If the SEC would have complained, they could have said, look, next year we're going to have 12. You'll have both of those teams in, so it doesn't matter. Yep. Let us have 1 year without the SEC, and then everybody will be happier because there will be a non-SEC champion, and then we can go to this 12-team playoff. And I think that maybe that's the problem is there's going to be different conferences winning national championships from now on.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people are like, we shouldn't be expanding past 4. That's it waters down the regular season. You're right. It does a little bit to a point. You can afford to have 2 losses, but at the same time, you're also, with the current positioning that we've got playoff wise, there are some 2-loss teams that could do some damage that don't get the opportunity to because they've lost 2 games to really good teams. It doesn't matter who you lose to. If you lose 2 games, you're not in the playoff, period. Mm-hmm. It's not happening. In the 14 playoff, no 2-loss team ever made it to the playoff. Next year, there will be 2 and maybe even 3-loss teams in the playoff.
Well, and
so those records will be different, but that doesn't mean it's going to water it down and make it horrible football. You're going to get some more teams that should be considered in the playoffs with more than 1 loss that get the chance to compete, and they will compete. So,
and we could even go as far as last year. I mean, look at USC. How many people probably wanted to see USC in the football playoffs, but had they not played the Pac-12 championship game, they would have only been 1 loss. They'd have been the number 14, but because they lost to Utah.
I still contended, and even to this point, that a conference championship loss should have not ever affected a team and where they were headed. Only a win could affect.
Right.
Because USC lost an extra game that wasn't on their schedule. So take that extra game off their schedule. They're a 1-loss team. They're the number 4 team in the country. They should have been in the playoff, period.
You say, and much to your point, and look at what they did with Ohio State. They didn't play an extra game. They were a 1-loss team, so they flipped them around, and that's how Ohio State got in. It ended up being beneficial for us as fans because, I mean, Ohio State played a fantastic game against Georgia.
Correct.
But, like you said, though, I mean, it is, it sucks because, but I also kind of get it because, say, hypothetically, if they get rid of divisions, especially for the Big Ten, you have Michigan and Ohio State as your last 2 teams. Okay, well, how do we decide who gets to go in, at least in the 14 playoff format? Now, obviously, it won't matter as much. Whoever, even if you lose, you will more than likely still probably get in, depending on what your record is, to the 12-team format. But no, I agree. I do think that I don't think it'll water it down. I think it gives you better product. It gives you better matchups. And plus, look at a lot of the teams, last year that didn't make it in. You look at LSU. They beat Alabama. They had beat another really big team. That was kind of surprising. Alabama only had the 2 losses to Tennessee and Florida and LSU. And we heard Nick Saban crying about, well, we're one of the 2 best. We're one of the 4 best teams, but we have 2 losses. Yeah, but you're not SEC champion, so go away.
Correct. And it's gonna be weird to see 2 and 3 loss teams into the playoffs, but it's gonna happen. It's just gonna and like eventually there will be a 2-loss, 3-loss, maybe even champion. because they get hot and they play really good football, and maybe the teams that they should be playing get tripped up. So,
yeah.
But that wraps it up. The 100th episode. It's in the bank. It's done. It's done, Tony. We are moving on from episode 100. Since Dalton's out and I'm taking his spot, you go ahead and take it away for where our listeners can find us.
Okay, so you can find us on the TikToks, the Instagram, and the X, formerly known as Twitter, at B1G_talk. That's big talk, but you got to spell the one with the I with a one and have an underscore in there. On Facebook, you can find us at Big Talk, B1G Talk. You don't have to add the underscore in there unless you really, really want to.
And don't click on all Big Talk.
Yeah, all Big Talk is not the same.
It's not.
We're like Papa John's. We're better. But anyway,
we're just Big Talk.
And we're like Pizza Hut. You can't out pizza us. You just can't. You can catch us every week on the All Sports All Plays Network. You can also get the app for the All Sports All Plays Network on the Google Play or the Apple Store. You can find us later that day on the Lounge Media Group. You can also find us later through the video and through the audio on the Spotify podcast. I remembered it this time, Sam, and you can get us on just about everywhere that you get your podcasts.
Everywhere.
Just about everywhere when it comes to that.
Yeah, except for, like Bob's website where he plays podcasts that he likes. We can't be found there, probably. I don't know Bob, but I don't know that you should be on his website either.
This is why nobody likes Bob. If you can spell your name backwards the way you can forwards, there's a problem. Hannah's, I'm talking to you too. Just throwing it out there.
All right. Well, that does it for this episode of Big Talk. Merry Christmas and happy holidays, everybody. We will be back in between the holidays for next week. I do believe Dalton will be back, Tony, next week. So we're really excited to have been to this point. Tony, you've played a big part in these 100. Thank you so much for tuning in and letting us chat to you about the best conference in the country, in our opinion, that we get to talk about and love about it. That we thank you for that. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Enjoy, everybody. For Tony Hollinsworth, I'm Sam Sprunger. We'll see you later.